Welcome to the online handstand workshop. Today I'll be giving you the information you need to get yourself from no handstand to a 30-second handstand. We'll be breaking the handstand down into parts. We'll be polishing and understanding those parts and then putting them together to form a nice, solid, efficient handstand and a felt understanding in the body. To begin with, we're going to cover some key terms and principles. There are three key terms. The first is center of mass. Now, the center of mass is usually located somewhere between your navel and your hips. It refers to the average point of the matter that makes up your body. Now, the center of mass isn't a specific body part, which means that if I were to stand up and reach forward like this, my center of mass is likely somewhere around here. If I were to lean back and arch, my center of mass is somewhere around here. So the center of mass can be outside of the body. Again, not a specific body part, just an average point. The second principle is the base of support. Now, the base of support is whatever part of you is in contact with the ground. More specifically, if my hands are in contact with the ground, if it was just my hands, my base of support would be the perimeter around the area that they both cover. So if I were to draw one big fence around both hands, everything inside that area is my base of support. It's important to know this because the smaller the base of support, the harder it is to balance, and the bigger the base of support, the more potential there is for easy balance. You already know this, when you stand on one foot, it's harder than standing on 2 feet. The third principle, rather term, we'll get to the principle in a second, the third term is the line of gravity. Now, the line of gravity refers to a vertical imaginary line running from the center of mass to the floor. This line is always vertical, it's always straight, and it's describing the way gravity is acting upon your body. These three terms bring us to one big core principle of hand balancing, and that principle is center of mass over base of support. Now, this means that the average position of your body, the center of mass, has to remain directly over or inside the base of support, otherwise you'll tip, you'll lose balance. So the name of the game in balance is keeping the center of mass inside the base of support, as close to the line of gravity as possible. Now that we've covered that, we're going to move on to some key ideas. These are ideas that can streamline your progression in hand balancing. The first is understanding that the mind and the inner ear are doing the work. Now, the mind, the brain, is processing all of the information that comes in from the body. And it does that through the vestibular system, which is located in the inner ear. The vestibular system gives the brain information about where the body is in space, which way it's orientated, the position of the head, and all kinds of internal sensations about where you are in space and whether or not you're balanced. So when we're practicing balancing, we're challenging the brain and the inner ear. It's a skill, and therefore it's something which becomes a little bit more mental than a lot of other strength skills. The second point, or second idea, is that we want to minimize variables. Because there's so much information coming up to the brain through the vestibular system, through the senses, through the touch senses, we need to keep things simple. If we don't, we'll overwhelm our poor brain while it's trying to learn how to hand balance. So to do this, I recommend you practice in a place which is windless, distractionless, and where the floor is nice and solid. The more squishy the floor is, the more muffled those information pieces going to the brain become. The more things going on in the environment, again, the more overwhelmed the brain becomes. Which brings us to our third idea, that meditation really helps. If you have a regular meditation practice, it will assist you in your balance practice. The reason for this is that meditation, as you might know if you practice it, helps to cultivate this attitude of gentle awareness, of gentle focus amongst distractions. It helps you to become familiar with your mind, familiar with your body, and familiar with sensation. A practice that I would highly recommend in meditation is a body scan. In the body scan, you will draw your attention to a particular part of the body, usually the feet, and piece by piece, you will work upwards, focusing all the way up the body until you eventually reach the crown of your head. A second option to work on is feeling one hand. You might choose to feel your right hand, but rather than looking at your right hand as an observer, see if you can feel as your hand. Put yourself inside your hand and feel the sensation from the inside out. These simple practices can help you to open up a really good dialogue with your body and will assist your balance. Now, the fourth idea is that we're going to balance from the bottom up. So balancing from the bottom up is something that we're already familiar with. Whenever we're standing, we're using our feet and our toes to balance primarily. We don't really flail around with our hands. You might see toddlers doing it, or someone who's just learning to walk. But balancing happens from low down, and those corrections, that constant adjustment force, travels all the way up the body. The more efficient we are, the more still we can be in the upper body, the more fluid and fluent we can be, because we're making specific corrections with the lower body. So balancing from the bottom up in a handstand is the same idea, except your hands are going to become your feet. This means that we'll aim to balance with the hands, then use the elbows and the shoulders if we need to. And then really the hips are more of a last resort, and the feet should only really be there to spot you if you're falling or hold a particular shape. If we can balance from the ground, it will require more wrist and hand strength, but it will allow eventually a more efficient hold. Now, one last thing. Balance is not found. Balance is created. Because we're constantly moving and we're not still, like a tripod or a table, we have to constantly recreate and recalibrate balance within and over our base of support. This means constantly making adjustments, and it means you're not going to find balance. You're going to create it. You're going to build balance using focus and using tensions within your body. So, that's the introduction. That's all the general information you're going to need about handstands. And from here on in, we're going to get more specific.